foarte mult. Este modul prin care îmi arătați că ceea ce fac aici vă place și de asemenea ajutați ca algoritmul Instagramului să funcționeze mai bine și să ducă mai departe informația de aici către oameni care poate chiar au nevoie să audă într-un anumit moment din viața lor fix ceea ce noi discutăm aici, ceea ce reușesc să obțin de la invitații mei. Așadar, vă spun încă o dată, bună seara, bine ați venit! Mă bucur să văd că sunteți atât de mulți și că îmi faceți și cu mâna. Vă fac și eu cu mâna, nu pot să vă fac tuturor, dar să apăs aici pe wave, dar vă fac așa cu mâna tuturor la modul general, să zic. Vreau să-mi spuneți dacă ne auzim bine, pentru că este foarte important să știu că ne auzim. Și vreau să-mi lăsați aici un comentariu. Un da, dacă aud, pentru mine este excelent. Vreau să aud un da, ne auzim bine. Și merg mai departe. Da, cred că... Văd că nu-mi zice nimeni, da. Deci, super, ne auzim, minunat. Pentru început, știți că lansez tot timpul câte o întrebare către voi și întrebarea pe care vreau în seara aceasta să vă adresez este una care cred că e delicată sau este intimă. Te iubești tu pe tine însuți sau pe tine însăți? Și dacă da, cum manifesti acest lucru? Pentru că despre iubirea de sine voi discuta în această seară cu invitatul meu, Dr. David R. Hamilton. După doctoratul său, Dr. David R. Hamilton a lucrat ca cercetător științific, dezvoltând medicamente pentru cancer și pentru boli cardiovasculare. Inspirat de efectul placebo și de puterea creierului și a gândurilor, a părăsit tot ce înseamnă industria farmaceutică pentru a scrie și pentru a educa oamenii despre cum își pot valorifica mintea și gândurile și emoțiile pentru îmbunătățirea stării de sănătate. În prezent este autorul a 11 cărți, printre care titluri de bestseller, cum este Cum poate mintea să vindece corpul și cele 5 efecte ale bunătății. Apare în mass media în mod regulat, fiind invitat la BBC și la alte televiziuni din Marea Britanie și din Statele Unite ale Americii și iată, invitat și aici pe Instagram, pe contul meu, ceea ce mă bucură și mă onorează foarte tare. Iar Dr. Hamilton va fi prezent și weekendul acesta la conferința The Inner Mapping Inside, care va avea loc la Cluj Napoca, conferința dedicată celor care prețuiesc tot ce ține de zona de mindfulness și de dezvoltare personală. În cadrul acestei conferințe, subiectul despre care va vorbi Dr. Hamilton este cum poate mintea să vindece corpul. Ne va arăta cum putem folosi imaginația și procesele de gândire pentru a stimula propriile sisteme de apărare și de vindecare ale corpului nostru, pentru a combate bolile și durerea. Legătura, știți bine că legătura dintre minte și corp este un instrument foarte puternic în preluarea controlului asupra vieții și asupra propriilor ambiții. Însă, mai mult de atât, puterea gândirii ne poate afecta în moduri profunde, ne poate schimba viața și ne poate inclusiv influența starea de sănătate. Însă, până ajungem să îl vedem poate pe Dr. Hamilton la Cluj, el este aici prezent, alături de noi live. Good evening, Dr. Hamilton. Please ask me to be live in my video so that I can approve it and you can join us. I'll just see here if you have sent me the request, because it's been a lot of waving going on. So please just send the request to join. Yes. Yes, I have found it.
Hello, Sonia.
Hello, Dr. Hamilton. Good evening. Thank you for taking your time to be here with us. It's really an honor.
It's my pleasure, and I hope everyone is okay with my Scottish accent.
You know, I thought about that, and I do hope that I will understand everything. So, but if I will not understand everything, please just bear with me and allow me to ask you to repeat. I hope it will be okay with you.
I hope it will be okay.
So it was your book, actually, I Heart Me, The Science of Self-Love, that you have launched in 2015, am I right?
Yes, yes.
That inspired our DoerTalks this evening. And I would like to know from you why you have chosen this topic for your book, and what is the science behind self-love?
Do you know, I didn't ever intend to write a book on self-love. It was accidental. I remember I was at the side of the stage in a large conference in Scotland, and I was about to speak after the late Dr. Wayne Dyer, and I was the next speaker on, and I felt really, I felt anxious and very afraid. And I realized that the reason why I felt anxious is because part of me didn't feel like I was good enough to go on the stage after Wayne Dyer, because he was like a hero to me. And at that moment, I remembered a time when I was a young child at school, and the teacher reprimanded me because the teacher asked everyone, all the children, to bring money in to go on a school trip. And I didn't bring my money in. And the reason I didn't bring my money is because my mum and dad, my parents, were very poor, and I didn't want to ask them for the money. But the teacher was very mean. And she said to me, if David Hamilton isn't good enough to bring his money in, then he's not getting to go on the school trip. And she made me stand in the corner, and all the other children in the class were given a yellow badge. Now, I didn't mind not going on the school trip because I was only 6 years old, and I didn't even know what a school trip was, to be really honest. But the yellow badge felt hurtful, because when you're a child, you get a badge on your birthday and it's a special day. So what my 6-year-old brain processed at that time, it was that everyone else in the class is special except for me. And I think I carried that idea, and maybe similar ideas, all through my adult life. I mean, I got bullied at school, and I got bullied even in my adult years. And I think it was always there in my mind, but it was something that I suppressed. I was always trying to impress people and trying to be something special. And really what was driving it was I wanted people to like me. I wanted people to think that I was enough, whereas deep inside I didn't feel it myself. And it really came to a head. It came to a point that day when I was at the side of the stage about to speak after Wayne Dyer, and I just felt like crying. It was like I just wanted to lie on the floor and cry, but I had to go on stage because I was the next speaker. And I decided then that I need to solve this problem. And I realized that it wasn't a problem with confidence, it was a problem with self-love. And it was very deep, and I needed to give myself time to mend, to heal. And that was the beginning of me working on the book, a process that took me 2 years, because I needed that long to understand and to learn how to love myself a little bit more.
Have you, in this process, have you got help from someone from outside, or did you find the resources to loving yourself only by yourself? Was it self-teaching?
Yeah, it was mostly self-teaching, but I had the love and the support of my family and my partner and my friends, you know, so I always had people around me that I could rely on, people that I felt comfortable and safe with. So I always have my circle, I suppose. But most of the work really was me just learning and devising techniques and practicing them so much to like, you know, because I'm a scientist by trade. You know, that was my original background. So the way I did this is I found an exercise or a technique, and I did an experiment on myself. You know, I tested it and worked on it to see if it worked for me. And so I learned some very, very powerful strategies, really, but it was mostly me working by myself to learn this, I suppose.
It's your story is incredible, and actually, as you told it, I almost got tears in my eyes, and I contained them. because I had this familiar feeling, and I'm sure that I've been there, and I still feel like this sometimes. And it's incredible how this kind of childhood experiences affect your whole life, and they bring some very good people to a certain stage when they really doubt their qualities and their talents, and they get to a point where it's, I cannot do it anymore. I have to get over it, and I have to let myself be seen, and I have to go into my higher self to discover my higher self. And regarding the higher self, this is a discussion that, because this is why I asked you if you got help from someone else, because usually people who go to therapy, they get onto this kind of topic with a therapist. What is my higher self? What does it mean to have a sense of self? What does it mean to you?
For me, you know, I had to ask myself, you know, what am I trying to accomplish? And for me, self-love itself was developing an inner sense of worthiness and value that's not dependent upon people liking me, and it's not dependent upon situations working for me, or even positive things happening, or getting good reviews for my books. And so for me, I had to start thinking about, you know, who am I, and what is this sense, this sense of self-worth? And for me, my higher self is that deep, wiser part of myself that's always okay, and that it's always there, and it knows that everything is okay. It's just that our normally conscious self doesn't always listen. And for me, I think my normal waking conscious self hadn't always listened to, I guess, the sentiments of my wiser, higher self. And so part of my journey was really trying to reconnect with that spiritual side of myself, I suppose. And you know, one of the remarkable things that happened during this period was I lost my dog. So I had a puppy who arrived in my life 2 days before I started working on this book, and he passed away 2 days before I finished. And it was like he came into my life for that reason. And I remember on the day, and he died of bone cancer, and I remember on the day that he passed away, and then the next morning, my partner said, you know, we'd loved him. We'd done everything we could to save his life, because he'd been suffering, and we tried everything, even had a leg amputated. We did everything you could possibly imagine.
I'm so sorry you went through that.
Oh, thank you. And he slept beside us, and we'd loved him so much. And then when he passed away, I remember my partner said, where's all the love going to go? And I realized that he had actually burst me open. He'd opened my heart so wide that when he passed away, the love that the width that he'd opened me could never close again. So all the love went to everything. And it was like my deeper, wiser, higher self had now come to the surface. And ever since that day, about 7 years ago, it's like a gift he's left me that's never left. I feel a constant sense, like almost an effervescent, bubbling sense of love and warmth and affection for everyone. Everyone that I see, people from my past, people from my present, people I see on the street. It's like a gently simmering, bubbling sense of warmth and affection when I look at people. Even right now, when I look at you, and when I meet people in the street, and I talk to people that I've never met before. And it was like he gave me a gift when he passed away, but opening me up. And I think that's like, he helped me to get in touch with that deeper part of myself. And it opened, and it's never closed since then. And I think that was one of the, maybe perhaps one of the spiritual reasons, I think, that he came into my life, to help me to learn what self-love was, and to leave me something that will never go away. And it's that connection with that higher part of myself. And I think that's the portion that just loves everyone and everything. And it's always there. So, I mean, sometimes the intensity drops and it's barely visible, but it's always there in the background. I always feel it, and it's never left me since he passed away.
Do you think we need first to hurt deeply until we learn how to love?
I think sometimes for some, I don't think it's necessary for everyone. I think, you know, we all have an individual, a unique journey. And I think for some people, they can access wonderful places really just through the way in which they approach life and the way in which things happen. But for some other people, it sometimes goes via suffering. And for me, part of that was also learning that it was okay to be myself. Like I think I'd been afraid to be my true self, especially as an author, when people have expectations of you. And you start to, I often found myself trying to meet those expectations and trying to be the person that I believed that my readers thought I was. And that becomes a pressure, and you begin to hide behind a little mask as you begin to show yourself as the person that people think you are rather than who you actually were. And a big part of this process for me was also taking off that false mask and being myself. And that meant that I had to be vulnerable, and I had to be willing to have people to disapprove of me or not like who they saw. And that was all part of the losing of my dog as well, because I had to acknowledge that I was suffering. And I remember once on stage, Sonia, it was just after the book was published, and it was at Hay House in the UK, my UK publisher. And it was one of their conferences, and I was standing on the stage, hundreds of people. And I was talking, I didn't mean to talk about Oscar, my dog. And I started to talk about him, and I got very emotional because he played such a big part in my journey. And I got emotional and I started to cry. And I remember trying in that moment not to cry. You know, when you try not to cry, you go, and you take deep breaths.
I know.
And I was trying on the stage not to cry because there was hundreds of people watching me. And in that moment, I realized that I thought, why am I trying not to cry? Because I'm afraid that people will judge me, because I've written a book on self-love. And I'm thinking, this audience have come to see someone perhaps who is healed and who has all the answers, but instead he's crying on stage. I'm not going to buy his book. And that thought had entered my mind. And I thought, screw that, you know, I'll let that go, gone. And I just let that go and decided just to open up and cry openly. And I just said, excuse me at the moment, I'm suffering. I did lose my dog, and it's very painful, and I'm just going to cry, if you don't mind. And I just cried on the stage for, I don't know, a few minutes. And then someone ran up on the stage, a woman came up and gave me a hug. And then everyone started to cheer. And I remember after the talk, me having had that thought that that if people see me crying, no one will want to buy my book and no one will want to know who I am. In actual fact, my book sold out faster than any book.
It was a bestseller.
Yeah. And I remember my Hay House were sending people down. They'd sold out, and they had to send people out into London to bookshops to get copies so that they could bring them back and sign them. And that was a big lesson for me, that if being yourself sometimes just means not being concerned with whether people like who you're being. And for me, that was a big lesson for me, in having to just be myself, even if it meant that people might not like me or might not think that I was the author that they thought I was, or think that I was this advanced being who writes a book, who must be very intelligent, and maybe they won't think that anymore. And part of self-love is saying, I don't care about all that. I'm just going to be who I am and how I need to be right now. And right now in this moment, I am suffering because I lost my dog, and I'm going to cry because that's how I feel. And that was a huge part of my self-love journey, really.
Thank you for sharing this. Thank you so much for sharing it. I'm going to share something I've experienced myself too. Because in my mind, I've often thought about self-love and compared it to selfishness. And I have done this because my mother often told me, when she saw that I'm not going this path of self-sacrifice in my life, and she always told me, oh, you're so selfish. And I find this kind of remark very, very, very hurtful. So for me, if you tell me that you're selfish, and when I know that I really think a lot about the people around me, but that doesn't mean that I'm gonna ignore my needs, feels hurtful. But then, you know, when someone tells you this, and especially if someone who's close to you, who loves you, from where you expect in return a certain kind of emotions, let's say, when they tell you this, then maybe you step back and you think, okay, so maybe there's something wrong with me and the way I act. So in my mind, I thought, okay, now I have to change a little bit the way I do things. And I started to be very nice to people around me. So I'm nice to people even when I sometimes don't feel like being nice. And I want to ask you, is this people pleasing or is it kindness?
It can be a bit of both, but it's mostly people pleasing. First of all, I'm sorry you had that experience. That must have been very painful, especially when it's your mum, your mother. You know, I can imagine.
I hope she doesn't hear it.
Yeah. She probably didn't mean it in the way.
I'm sure she doesn't. She didn't.
Yeah, but so it's a difficult experience, and part of self-love is self-compassion. It's understanding. Part of that is understanding that we also have needs of our own. And I think someone said to me recently that you can't pour from an empty cup. That we need to fill up our own cup, and sometimes we have to learn that, you know, self-love can be that I have to look after my needs right now, because I have needs, and I need to support my mental health right now, and I have to put myself first before anyone else. But sometimes it's okay, and we can say, okay, once I finish attending to this thing or helping this person, then I will attend to my own needs. And it depends on the situation. Sometimes we need to put ourselves first, sometimes we don't. But either way, it's part of self-compassion. It's recognizing that, yes, I do have needs. And if I don't take care of those needs, then there might come a time that I'm no longer able to help anyone else because I've exhausted myself. So sometimes, because I've been very similar to you, and at times I was people pleasing, but at the same time, part of me was also aware that I was being kind. So sometimes I got tangled between people pleasing and being kind, and sometimes we just have to untangle that and recognize that I have my own mental health needs and my physical health needs, and I have to be mindfully aware of when I need to look after myself. And it might not be all the time, but there will be times when I need to look after my own well-being. And when you do that, it's not selfish. It's actually self-care. It's intelligent and mindful self-care. You're doing what you need to do so that you're better able to help others. And yes, there are other times when we can postpone doing that.
Our own needs.
We can postpone our own immediate needs because maybe a child or another loved one or family member needs us right now, and we have enough energy to say, okay, I'm okay right now, but there will come a time very shortly where I have to look after my own needs. Right now I can be kind, and I can be here for my children or my partner or my friend or whatever, but as soon as I'm done, I have to then recharge my own batteries. And it's just being mindfully aware of our own needs and our own energy levels, and as long as you're doing that, then you're being kind to yourself and you're also being kind to other people, and you begin to untangle the difference.
Setting limits is part of what's called self-love. And yes.
Yeah, setting limits, setting boundaries, and deciding that certain types of treatment I cannot have. You know,
how do you set boundaries with people who you love? Because it's easier to set boundaries with people outside your family or whom you meet now and then, but with people who are close to you and who offer you a lot of support sometimes, when you set boundaries, maybe then they say, look, I gave you so much, you cannot set a limit in your relationship with me.
Yeah, I've learned, and I might not have all the answers to these ones, but because I'm still learning as well. Mm-hmm. But what I've learned so far is compassionate communication. You know, because I think, you know, in the book I wrote about 3 stages of self-love. Mm-hmm. And stage 1 is I'm not enough, and stage mm-hmm. 2 is I've had enough, and mm-hmm. stage 3 is I am enough. And I've noticed that when I was at the stage I've had enough, then when I put boundaries down, they were very firm and sometimes pushing back and sometimes slightly harsh. Mm-hmm. But when I moved through to I am enough, I found that I could do the same thing, but I communicated it much more compassionately. And I found that perhaps I could find a time, an opportunity where I might explain my journey that I'm going through and some of my struggles and challenges. And because of that, I might have to ask if you could refrain from that type of behavior or that type of language right now, or that type of X, Y, or Z, or whatever it is, and just really put a gentle boundary, a compassionate boundary, where you're not stamping it down and saying you must never cross this line, but you're just gently asking mm-hmm. for the line to be respected. And I found that I was only able to do that.
When you do it gently, do people understand that it's a limit? Because when you say the word limit and you say the word gently, yeah. they somehow don't go together. They don't fit together.
So I found sometimes we have to change our words a little bit, and I don't really use limits and the words limits and stuff. Sometimes we have to find, I think sometimes there's many different ways we can say the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we have, depending who we're speaking to, sometimes we have to find a different way of communicating the same thing in a mm-hmm. way that doesn't feel like a wall that the person's being faced with. You know, if you're communicating with a loved one, find a way of communicating so that it doesn't feel like you're putting up a wall and saying, this is a limit or a mm-hmm. line, but a gentle, and it's possible then to sometimes gently communicate something without using that word limit, but just perhaps, you know, almost saying, this is just something where I am in my journey, in my suffering even, and I would hope that you would be able to help me with this. Mm-hmm. And if you could help me with this, then that would mean this type of behavior or language or thing maybe wouldn't work very well for me right now. You know, and although you're just finding a different way to say the same thing, and so how you communicate depends on the nature of the relationship you have with the person.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Please guide us a little bit through developing self-love, because it's very important to know where to start from.
Yeah, do you know what I did, Sonia? The first thing I did mm-hmm. is I went right to my science training. So I was very aware. I know a lot about how we shape brain circuits. You know, one of my books talks about using the mind. It's what I'm speaking in Cluj Napoca.
To heal the body, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I talk a lot about how it is possible to train and rearrange brain circuits in a way mm-hmm. that can impact the body in a positive way. But I learned early in my self-love journey that we can actually use our body to train the brain circuits. But for example, the mind and the body are always communicating. So mm-hmm. when you feel happy, you automatically smile. You yes. don't smile on purpose. You don't say, oh, I feel happy, I think I'll smile now. The smiling is automatic because the way that you feel is immediately expressed on your muscles, on your facial muscles, but also on your shoulders, your neck, mm-hmm. your back. But that communication goes both ways. It's called bidirectional, and it mm-hmm. means that just like how you feel expresses on your body, what you do with your body also goes back in and affects how you feel. And there's some lovely work, there was lovely work done at Harvard by a professor called Amy Cuddy, where she got people to stand for 2 minutes like Wonder Woman, or men could stand like Superman. And just 2 minutes of standing like that, it's called a power posture. And she measured levels of 2 hormones. And one hormone was associated with self-confidence and self-esteem.
Which one is that?
It was what was it? Testosterone. I don't always say it because women have testosterone as well. It plays a different role. Yeah, it plays a different role from males, but it's associated with self-confidence, even in females and males. And the levels, by just standing like that for 2 minutes, the levels rose considerably. And levels of stress hormones dropped dramatically. And other people instead were asked to stand in a closed, low power posture, the way you would stand when you feel afraid or worried or nervous or anxious. And in 2 minutes, their stress hormone levels went up and their confidence hormone levels went down. And what the study was showing is how we hold our body rapidly impacts on biology inside the brain, but also biology all throughout the body. And that we can actually use our bodies to train, to create in the moment how we want to feel. So early in my self-love journey, I practiced that every morning, the 2 minutes every morning. But then, as I went throughout my day, I corrected my posture about 10 or 20 times. Sometimes I would put a reminder on my phone, like maybe every hour or two, check, remember posture. And it'd be a ping me and I'd look at my phone, and I'd immediately realize that I was standing like that, or I was slouched over, and I would then straighten my spine, drop my shoulders.
Very good exercise. Thank you. Very good. I will keep this in mind.
I did it about 10 or 20 times a day. I just made an adjustment. And what happens then is if you make an adjustment of any muscle several times a day, something amazing happens. You begin to alter your brain circuits. Lots of research shows that if you make any physical repetitive movement with a muscle repetitively over days, weeks, or longer, then the brain areas connected to those muscles begin to change in shape on an almost permanent basis until we stop doing that. And so what I realized, if I keep changing my muscles, my back, my spine, my shoulders, my face, and change them and train them to be in a state that says, I am enough. I have an inner sense of worthiness and value, because that's what I was changing 10 or 20 times a day. I was finding a way of standing and moving as if my body was speaking and it was saying, I have an inner sense of worthiness and value, and 10 or 20 times a day. And so the muscles here on my neck and my shoulders and my back and my face were all being shaped, the circuits being shaped in the brain, until my brain was now learning and shaping, like you were molding dough before you put the dough in the oven to make bread, and my brain circuits were shaping. But when brain circuits shape, and brain circuits that are connected to emotional regions, then what begins to change as well is not only the circuits of the brain associated with your muscles, but the circuits of the brain associated with how you feel. And when I started doing this, something incredible happened within about a month or maybe 6 weeks or so, that I very, very gently started feeling very different about myself. And on the inside, I remember a couple of days thinking, you know, I just feel different, and I can't really put my finger on it. I can't explain it. I've not done anything. I've not done any fancy self-improvement work. I've not done any mental exercises. All I've actually done is adjusted my posture about 10 or 20 times a day by reminding myself on my phone to do it. But what was happening was I was training my brain circuits and also the emotional areas of my brain associated with how I feel about myself. Because how you feel about yourself will always show in your face in a challenging situation, and it will always show in your muscles. So if you train your body to be in that state of I am enough, or I have an inner sense of worthiness and value, it will also train your feelings inside your brain. And that was, for me, that was a game changer. That was like a life-changing practice for me. It was one of the most powerful things I've ever learned. And that was really the beginning. It was the first major jump in my self-love that I took during my self-love journey.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing this. I hope everyone who's listening and looking at us right now was paying attention and will try to practice it if they need it, I will definitely do that. Can you spot a person that does not love himself or herself?
Yeah, it's quite easy. It became easier for me, especially when I'd gone through the process myself and became acutely aware of how I was. So for example, before I started this, I would notice that in particular situations, even in, you know, I remember going to publisher events and I felt quite shy because I felt all the other authors are better than me, you know, just in my own little voice. This is before I started working on this book. And so I would feel quite afraid, and I would pretend that I was on the phone or I had an email to do. And if people could look at me, what they would probably see is a tension in my facial muscles and a tension in my neck. And also what happens is your shoulders come in. If you're not feeling self-confident or high self-love, then your shoulders often come in and move in the way when you're feeling afraid or self-conscious. And sometimes your head will drop a little bit. And also your eyes will move a little bit faster. And sometimes you speak a little bit faster or you walk a little bit faster. You move your body. And so, and not always, it depends. If you're in a challenging situation, then you do a lot of these things unconsciously. And so I notice it now because I've been there. And if I see someone like that, then I actually reach out and try to help them to feel comfortable because I know what it feels like, you know. And so what I noticed is that by training myself to adjust my posture, then I didn't feel that way in those same situations. I actually felt quite good on the inside, and I wasn't bothered about whether anyone spoke to me or anything, and it became much, much easier. And so I think when you've done it yourself, it's easier to notice it in someone else. But it usually shows up in situations that you're afraid of or around people who make you feel nervous, or people who make you feel afraid, or you're people that you're maybe that you like and you're afraid to admit to them that you like, so you often speak fast and things like that. So but if we train ourselves through adjusting our posture several times a day, then we can enter these situations as a different version of ourselves, really. And that's what I learned through this practice.
Thank you. So this is a physical practice, let's say. Yes, we're working with our bodies, but then we also need to work with our minds. And I was thinking, are there any self-talk lines that you can use and that they might work?
Yeah. Well, there's two strategies right away I could recommend. The first is you can actually speed up this brain training process by visualization, by imagining yourself in particular situations. You know, so situations that you would normally find that you're not as self-loving as you would like to be. And you can imagine yourself entering into that situation, but not just imagining an outcome like people tend to do when you visualize, but imagine your shoulders being relaxed and your spine being upright and your face being relaxed. And what you're imagining isn't so much an outcome. You're imagining how you're being in that situation, and the way in which you're being, and the way in which you're communicating, how you're speaking, not just what you're saying, but how you're saying the things that you say. And what that does is it speeds up the process of training the brain. And so it's a really, see, I call it my best self visualization. You can literally visualize your best self over and over again. So that's one way. Another really simple way of like an affirmation process is things called self-affirmations. So self-affirmations, it's something that was discovered, you know, 100 years ago. And I think in the self-help movement, we sort of lost touch with the original essence of affirmations. And the original essence of affirmations were really about affirming who you are on the inside. And so psychologists in the late 80s developed something called self-affirmation theory. There was a psychologist called Claude Steele. And basically, it shows that us humans are motivated with having a positive self-perception of ourselves. And so if we can reinforce that, it can make us feel good. So a simple exercise is to figure out what your core values are. You know, like, for example, what are the core values that really drive you? Like, for example, one of mine is kindness. Kindness is a core value for me. Some people's core values are friendship, you know, being a good friend. You can find it on the internet. You can find lists of core values and identify. Most people have lots of values you can identify with, but maybe only 5 or 6 that are your core, your central guiding values. And then what to do is find each of these values and then write a positive affirmation that reinforces that value. So, for example, one of my values is kindness. So I would then write an affirmation that reinforces who I am, that kind aspect. So I would write something like, I am a kind person and I try my best to be kind to people and to be there for people when they need me. Something along those lines. And what research and scientific research has actually been done on these kind of, they're called self-affirmations, different from affirmations that say, I'm going to achieve this, or I can do such and such. They're not about achieving, they're about, this is who I am. So when we affirm, this is who I am, these are my values on a deep level, it begins to change us on the inside out and it builds self-esteem. And research shows that it actually makes us feel bigger on the inside and our problems begin to shrink because we feel bigger than our problems. Instead of feeling the problem is bigger than me, something happens in the brain and we suddenly, when we affirm these values, you start to feel bigger than your problems. And it's amazing. It's very quick. Some of the research is quite recent, actually. Some even more recent than the book. The book that I wrote on this. This is stuff that I've discovered since the book. Actually, it's a very, very powerful technique. So they're called. So it's about just finding what are my core values, and then writing a positive statement that affirms this is who I am. This is my value. This is who I am. And if we repeat these affirmations, they're called self-affirmations. Then it begins to build self-esteem, self-love on the inside.
Writing them down, does it make them stronger?
I find so. And I think partly because writing things down slows your brain, it slows your mind down. I've always found that if I don't write things down, I think about it too fast and then I forget about it. But when you write something down, it slows your mind down. And when you're writing it, you're focused intently. You're focused exactly on what it is and what it means. So you're more focused on it when you write it down. And also, then you can see it and you can read it rather than just trying to recall it. If it's there, it's on a post-it pad or it's on your desk or on your fridge, your refrigerator, then you see it. So writing it down reminds you of it more frequently. And then if you're reminded more frequently, the effect is more powerful.
What about, every one of us, we have very good traits and that we need to acknowledge and we need to be proud of them, and we need to when we know them, we can believe more in ourselves. But then there are also these parts of us that exist, like, let's say, I'm not so punctual, which is something that might affect your relationship to others. And then you think of yourself, oh my God, I'm not punctual. How can you get rid of this kind of bad thoughts about you?
Yeah. So rather than being self-critical, what I found is I use a little line, like, for, let's say it was punctual. I would say something like an affirmation to myself, like, even though I am sometimes not very punctual. It's a little line that I got from people who practice EFT. So even though I'm not very punctual, I'm trying my best to improve in that area for the benefit of myself and other people. And then it becomes a gentle way of not being critical of myself, acknowledging something that I would like to work towards, but I'm not reinforcing and telling myself that I'm not a good person because I'm not punctual. I'm just acknowledging that even though I have this trait, I understand and I'm trying gently in my own way, in my own time, to become better, to become more punctual for my own, to service my own needs and also the needs of other people. So that's how I do these kind of things.
Going back to the beginning of our discussion, when you shared with us your experience as a 6-year-old boy who was not welcomed in that trip because of something that had nothing to do with himself.
Yeah.
How can we, when we think about our children, let's say we understand what self-love is, we get to the point where we as a parents love ourselves. How can we teach our children self-love?
So I think it's a regular reinforcing of their core values, for example. And you know, I don't know if you've ever watched the film or read the book. It's called The Help. It's a wonderful.
I've watched the movie. Yes.
Oh, I watched that. I think my favorite scene in that movie was the nanny was saying to the young child, "You are good, and you are kind, and you are you are important." Yeah.
Yes.
And every single day, and I thought I would love to have had that affirmation when I was a child. My mum and dad didn't understand about these sort of things. They're very good. They're very good people and they're good parents, but they didn't understand how important perhaps this type of thing is. And I remember I got very emotional watching that scene because I thought, how amazing would it be if we could say something like that for our children, something that perhaps is personal to them. It might not be you are good, you're kind, you're important. It might be something else, but something that's more about affirming the nature of the child. Maybe the personality or the skills or the loves of the child, but something that's being reinforced on a daily basis, and it's very gentle. But when a child's young, it sinks into the mind and it becomes something that that permanently becomes something that they know on the inside. And I think it's just learning. Because learning is really just repetition of something, and so it's repeating something that they could learn on a very, very deep level. I think that's one thing that we can do for our children.
Wow, thank you so much. I do believe that everything that you share with us tonight is really valuable, and I believe that whoever will listen to you will think about it. At least that person will think about it. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and your knowledge. And I hope that.
Thank you for having me on your Instagram live. It's been really lovely to talk to you and to have this conversation. So thank you for your lovely personality and your lovely questions and making this enjoyable for me as well.
I hope you enjoyed it. I tried my best.
Yeah.
I was also very.
Thank you for being okay with my Scottish accent. I know sometimes it's quite. I might speak fast, and so thank you.
It was perfect. It was perfect, and it gave me a lot of good vibes and good energy. And I'm sure that the people who will be in Cluj on the 3rd and who will be listening to you and will see you live on stage will get the same, even more vibes, because you will be there physically. So you will be talking there at the inner, mapping inside about how the mind can heal the body. Another fantastic topic.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited. I've never been to Romania, so this is my first time. I'm so excited. I cannot wait. I'm so happy to be there.
You will like it. People are very friendly and they will welcome you, I'm sure, with lots of good energy. So Dr. Hamilton, once again, thank you so much for taking your time to be here with us. Thank you for the valuable lessons and experience that you've shared. And I'll see you soon in Romania.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And thanks everyone for joining.
Have a lovely evening too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye then.
Așadar, aceasta a fost discuția despre iubirea de sine cu Dr. David R. Hamilton. Din punctul meu de vedere, a fost o discuție revelatoare. Cred că putem lua acasă mesaje importante și anume faptul că putem practica iubirea de sine, că putem încerca să ne conștientizăm valorile, să ne conștientizăm valorile profunde pe care fiecare dintre noi le avem, să le scriem pe o hârtie și să pornim de la ele diverse afirmații. De asemenea, putem să îi ajutăm pe copiii noștri să învețe ce înseamnă iubirea de sine, spunându-le, repetându-le că sunt valoroși, privind înăuntru lor, identificând la ei ceea ce au bun și repetându-le aceste lucruri on and on, cum se zice în limba engleză, pentru că ele se vor sedimenta undeva acolo și vor duce la dezvoltarea unor persoane cu multă încredere în sine și când ai iubire de sine, ai iubire și pentru aproapele tău, ai iubire și pentru cei din jurul tău. Ați auzit cum spunea Dr. Hamilton că ceea ce simte în momentul ăsta pentru toți oamenii cu care intră în contact este iubirea. Despre iubire am auzit recent o discuție în care cineva spunea că iubirea este o alegere, este o decizie, este felul în care alegem să ne comportăm zi de zi și mai puțin un sentiment. Poate ăsta este un lucru la care să vă gândiți. Vă mulțumesc că ați fost alături de mine, alături de noi. Nu uitați, coment, like, share dacă v-a plăcut și dacă sunteți pe YouTube, un subscribe, pentru ca mesajul pe care l-a transmis aici Dr. Hamilton să ajungă la cât mai multă lume. Poate chiar la persoane care au mare nevoie de ceea ce el a spus în momentul acesta. Vă mulțumesc, vă doresc o seară minunată și ne vedem la următorul live din seria DoerTalks.